Monsieur le Président, Madame Rajavi, ladies and gentlemen, as the Chairman has just mentioned, I'm here as an international lawyer, as someone who has specialized in international refugee law over several decades, but I'm also here, of course, to share in the outrage and the sorrow of us all at this fearful massacre that has taken place. But I want briefly to say something else, to say something perhaps rather dry, less emotive, something about responsibility, and in particular about legal responsibility, because I do believe that these legal issues do carry weight and must be attended to. I want to start just by recalling how often the UN General Assembly has reaffirmed what to us international lawyers is a basic, obvious principle, but something that does call for reiteration from time to time. It's reaffirmed a well-established principle, something that has been around in the relations between states since sovereignty came onto the agenda. And that is that the state is responsible for what occurs within its territory. And that if the conduct of the state, whether it acts or whether it fails to act, if the conduct of the state violates the international legal obligations of the state, then that state is responsible at international law. So for these tragic circumstances, the state of Iraq is, as a matter of international law, responsible. Not only because it is sovereign, but also, as Madam Rajavi has reminded us, because it has itself committed itself to assurances, written and oral assurances. It has undertaken specific obligations towards other states with regard to the treatment of those in Ashraf and now Liberty. It has undertaken obligations towards the United Nations, and it has undertaken obligations towards the individual refugees and asylum seekers. It is these facts which are the basis, too, of Iraqi responsibility in international law for what is clearly a crime against humanity. Now, equally, international law governs the status and protection of those who have been taken hostage, as indeed it does govern the status and protection of all those in Camp Liberty or Ashraf. As asylum seekers, as refugees, they have an internationally recognized legal status. And again, the responsibility of the state is engaged, because it is clearly the case that in its capacity as sovereign, Iraq has not only control over its territory, but knowledge. It is in possession of knowledge of the facts relating to the hostages. And in the particular circumstances of the present case, international law, customary international law, the treaties to which Iraq is a party, binds Iraq not to refool those who have been detained as a result of this tragic incident, not to send back these individuals to any country in which they are at risk of persecution, of torture, of ill treatment, of death. We have also heard of the other institutional responsibilities which I will do no more than underline. That of the High Commissioner for Refugees, for example, or that of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. UN institutions at large then have special responsibilities in relation to the protection of those in Iraq, both to ensure their protection and to ensure the finding of solutions for those unable to remain in that country. And of course, as we do know, solutions requires the active cooperation, not just of UN organizations and agencies, but of states at large. And there is finally a dimension which international law is increasingly paying attention to, that dimension of justice which attaches to individual responsibility. Many of you perhaps will have seen in the documentation which has been issued in connection with this tragedy the names of those Iraqi officials and others, military and others, who have been responsible, who are responsible for what has occurred in Ashraf. It seems to me essential that that genesis of a database be developed, that names be added to it to identify those who have been responsible for this massacre, with a view to their prosecution. that this database of names of individuals be shared with appropriate international institutions like Interpol, of course, but more widely, that it be shared with civil society at large. There is a broader international responsibility, a responsibility of the international community of states at large, to uphold the rule of law, to deny impunity for those responsible for international crimes. And it is essential that momentum be given to the prosecution of those who are accused of engagement, of involvement in such activities. As an international lawyer, for me, the law is clear in relation to what has gone on in Ashraf and in Iraq. It is absolutely clear. But justice requires more than clarity in the law. It demands more than silence. It requires action. Thank you, Mr. President.